These three chapters, the fourth, fifth, and sixth chapter, are the teachings that implementing them will prevent our bodhicitta that we have given rise to through the process taught in the first three chapters from becoming corrupt or from declining. And our bodhicitta intention, our aspirations, engaging bodhicitta can be damaged or broken or corrupted by carelessness, by a lack of introspection, and by anger. And so each of those three threats, those three dangers, are taught, or how to prevent those dangers from occurring. So now we're in this chapter on, says vigilant introspection, and it is really the teachings on mindfulness and alertness. We could say introspection. Another term, an alternative translation, is also alertness. It's the ability to notice what's going on. Particularly here, it is the alertness is it's a mental faculty that allows us to maintain mindfulness. Mindfulness means continuously paying attention to an object. And introspection or alertness sees whether or not that mindfulness is active or not. And also introspection and alertness. I like alertness because there's a certain energy to alertness, because also this quality or this faculty corrects. It informs mindfulness to come back. And in order to develop introspection, then Shantideva first talks about the mind and how all harm that we worry about come from the mind. And in the second to the 8th verses, each verse there, when we read it, these are contemplations that will convince, or that will allow us to gain, or how we gain certainty as to that our mind is the source of our suffering. And then in the subsequent chapters 9 through 17, each verse talks of how virtue comes from the mind. So both suffering comes from the mind and virtue comes from the mind. And he uses the 6 paramitas as a model of virtue, just touching on each one of those to show that all virtue also arises from the mind. And then sums up with that all bodhisattva training is founded on the mind. Then in the 18th to the 23rd chapters, he presents verses that we can reflect and contemplate that show the need, how necessary it is to keep watch over mind. Where he says, therefore I will take in hand and well protect this mind of mine. Now that I see that my mind is the source of all sorrow and it's the source of all of virtue, then I will protect it from forgetting what to adopt and what to avoid. So what use to me are many disciplines if I can't guard and discipline my mind? So all the 84,000 teachings of the Buddha are all directed towards guarding the mind. And how we guard the mind is with mindfulness and introspection. Okay, then he'll talk more about that. And that was just the beginning of this section. This is goes from up to through verse 23. So then he he compares mind here to if we have a physical wound or something like a broken bone or a sore or a burn or something that's very sensitive and wound. If we have a wound, he said, when in the wild, unruly crowds, I'm careful and attentive of my wounds. Likewise, when in evil company, this wound, my mind, I'll constantly protect. And so wild, unruly crowds are, again, this is a metaphor for those, well, it's not really a metaphor, we actually do this. It's a comparing. What wily and unruly means is if we're with people that are careless and kind of unrestrained by any conduct, by any code of conduct or discipline, and they're distracted by outer objects. Not everyone is interested or even conceives of intentionally doing virtue. And so when we are around situations and companions like this, then they may cause us to give rise to anger, or on the other hand, to desire, to lust or desire. And then we who are just beginning a bodhisattva training and are trying to remember what the vows and commitments and precepts of bodhisattva training are, then we will be vulnerable to losing our bodhisattva vows. And so this mind, which is likened to a wound, I'll constantly protect. I'll protect it from my own future suffering. So we should as it says in the commentary, we should avoid people and situations that will stimulate or excite our anger or our desire. If I carefully protect my wounds, my physical wounds, because I fear the pain of minor injuries, I protect my wounds because in order so that they don't get worse. And why shouldn't I protect the wound that is my mind for fear of being crushed beneath the cliffs of hell? So this mind is a wound. It's called a wound because it has the capacity to respond negatively to situations. We're much more familiar with. We have many accumulated habits of negatively reacting, desire and anger, jealousy, and so forth. That's more, those reactions are much more in keeping with our habit. And now our bodhicitta precepts and vows and trainings, they're not so embedded in our mind that they won't become broken or forgotten. And so if this is how I act and live, then even in the midst of evil folk, or even with fair women, all is well. My steady keeping of the vows will not decline. So if I act and live guarding my mind with mindfulness and awareness, and always maintain bodhicitta training continuously, and uphold the precepts and commitments of bodhicitta training, and do so in a kind of a continuous, kind of enthusiastic way, then all will be well. In other words, they won't become corrupted. Of course, here Shantideva is talking to his fellow monks at Nalanda. But the same idea is that even when there's someone, a nun who sees a real handsome, strong fellow, or a monk who is attracted to a woman, or whatever it is that, whatever kind of situation, whatever person would become sexually interesting to you, then even with that kind of a person, you will have the steadiness and mindfulness and introspection to be able to engage with that person without losing your vows. That's why mindfulness and introspection are good and useful states of mind. And we should also remind ourselves that when we talked at the outset, in the beginning of the text, on precious human life, many places in the beginning were teachings on the advantages and freedoms we have. And it's because of our cognitive, sort of the subtlety and sophistication of our cognitive ability, that we can develop mindfulness when it wasn't there, and we can develop alertness when it wasn't there. And we can do that because of all of the karmic causes and conditions have come together temporarily in this life. And so this is how we can bring meaning, engage in what's meaningful in this life, is by training in the precepts, learning what the precepts are, and then developing mindfulness, a greater and greater mindfulness, and a vaster and vaster alertness, introspection. So then, next, as long as bodhicitta is maintained, like for Shantideva, that is the most important thing. Even my property, my honor, all can freely go. Any honor from his erudition or his meditational experience, or any disciples, all those things can freely go. My body even, and my livelihood as well. None are as significant as guarding bodhicitta. When the kleshas arise to defeat bodhicitta, to overwhelm, to outdo bodhicitta, then those kleshas will continue to diminish my ability to practice bodhicitta. And even other virtues may decline, but never will I let my mind regress. So even other virtues refers to even practicing virtue through physical practices or through speech. Even those are not as important as mindfulness and introspection, as far vis-a-vis the presence or the absence of bodhicitta. Even the presence or absence of awareness of what is virtuous and what is non-virtuous as a integral, basic component of bodhicitta precepts. So never will I let my mind regress. Never will I give up training in mindfulness and introspection. And I will continue to observe the vows and precepts. Even just peacefully sitting and thinking about a bodhicitta, thinking about sentient beings with love and compassion, thinking about sentient beings having Buddha nature, and just maintaining that and becoming habituated to that is sufficient. So anything to do with bodhicitta, compassion, aspiration, so forth, because a Buddha Shakyamuni attained perfect awakening through bodhicitta. And so training in bodhicitta is training in Buddha, training to become a Buddha. So this is all expressing, if you read each one of these verses and let it direct you to seeing how necessary it is to practice mindfulness and awareness. And then Shantideva says here, all you who would protect your minds, maintain your mindfulness and introspection, guard them both at cost of life and limb. I join my hands beseeching you. So here he's interjecting this, I join my hands beseeching you, just to emphasize how important these passages are and how important this practice is. Maintaining your mindfulness of karma and your knowledge of the precepts, and through introspection then we are able to notice how we are doing, how our mind is working, how our speech is working, how our body is working. That's our alertness. We should always extend that ability to observe our mind in that way, our body, speech, and mind. And mindfulness is what they should be doing. Then he, in the next verse, 24, is now he goes into the drawbacks of lack of introspection. So this is very typical really all the teachings of Buddha are pieces of advice. All the 84,000 teachings are their advice. And when you hear advice, you can kind of like robotically follow that advice. But Shantideva, all along here, and in other teachings also in the Mahayana Sutras, first you should think of what the advantages of that advice are. And then there's also advice on how to think of what the advantages of this or that topic is. And also then, okay, if you don't follow my advice, then these are the disadvantages. This is the problem with that. And so we should have a greater and greater and greater familiarity with why should we practice introspection and mindfulness, and why it's not, what's the downside of not practicing it? What are the drawbacks of lack of mindfulness? What are the drawbacks of no introspection? And of course, this is a theme, I think, all along. So then here, those disabled by ill health are helpless, powerless to act. The mind, when likewise cramped by ignorance, that is to say, ignorance of what to adopt and what to avoid, meaning that mind is ignorant and then confused about what to do, then when our mind is cramped by that, it's impotent and can't do its work. It's unable to bring, particularly, we're not able to bring virtue to consummation, to fruition, or to, we're not able to perfect virtue. That's the drawback. For those who have no introspection, actually, for those who have mindfulness, but not introspection. Now here he's teasing it out. For those with mindfulness, but they have no introspection and they're distracted, then though you hear the teachings, ponder them and meditate, like water seeping from a leaking jar, their learning will not settle in their memories. So the point of this verse is that if there's only mindfulness and no introspection, then the Dharma won't blend with our mind. It won't affect our mind. Because we'll become distracted, and we won't know we're distracted. And that has to do with listening to the teachings, studying the teachings. Listening means studying also, and then contemplating them, subjecting them to some analysis or removing doubt about those teachings. And then meditating, just surrendering to what we have no doubt about. And so even when we're carrying out those, what are called the 3 trainings in wisdom, listening, contemplating, and meditating, those teachings won't really blend with our mind, simply with mindfulness. There's a phrase, we have to turn the wheel of Dharma in our own mind. That's taking what we are mindful of and then putting it into our mind through alertness. Then the next 26, next point. Many are endowed with joyful diligence. They're learned also and imbued with faith, but through the fault of lacking introspection, they will not escape the stain of sin and downfall. So there's many, what he's referring to here is those who do practice Dharma with joyful enthusiasm and practicing Dharma particularly in what to do, and practicing what to adopt and what to abandon. And they're learned in their precepts and in their understanding of karma and in their vows. And also they have faith in the 3 jewels, faith in the teachings, but through a lack of alertness, through lack of introspection, they occasionally still will veer off and get off track. So this introspection is like it's likened to a spy, a spy. Or also it's, we can say that it's like a mirror that shows our qualities, that shows our capacity, shows our flaws, our weaknesses, and sort of shows us our character, what kind of what our character is. So it brings an awareness of those facets of our mind to us. And those are not things that, like it says in the beginning here, those are not things that others can see. And even if they happen to get a glimpse of your faults and maybe kindly draw them to your attention, we'll just get irritated and angry at them. And so we can't, that's like it says in that, at the outset of this chapter, we need to become our own teacher. We need to look with introspection, with alertness at our own reactions and compare those with what our goals are, what our practice, what our trainings show us how we should be, and then see how we need to correct. Basically, we should never forget bodhicitta. From time to time, even after a practice session, we can check to see how we did. Did we get completely hooked by something that pulled us sort of, how do you say, like superficially we were doing what we were intending to do, but underneath there was this other chunk of kleshas that were being dragged underneath us. And so then we should check to see if Dharma improves our mind or Dharma made us worse. Like in the Lojong teachings of the there's two places. One is the two judges. We judge. We shouldn't let others judge us. This has to do with because we have the pretense of being a good Dharma practitioner. We even learned how to behave in such a way that we might give the impression to others that we're patient, but inside we're boiling. But our conduct and our comportment is very, kind of seems to be in accord with the Dharma. And then people think that we're very good Dharma practitioners. So that judge is not the one that we should pay attention to. We should pay attention to our own introspection, our own mind's analysis, or expose our flaws to ourself. Like a Dujum Rinpoche says, like practicing or engaging in the practice of exposing your flaws is the most profound Dharma practice. And so we need to muscle up our alertness, our introspection, we call vigilant introspection. It's like even Gampopa said, the Dharma can either carry us to the other shore, or it can throw us down to the lowest or the most extreme state of suffering. Dharma can do that. So it's all in our mind, how we practice. Mindful, introspective. Lack of introspection is a thief. It slinks behind when mindfulness abates, and all the merit we have gathered in, it steals, and down we go to lower realms. So introspection is a thief. Desire, hatred, pride and jealousy. All these are like thieves lurking, kind of like the thief that parks down the street and waits for you to leave and then comes in and steals from you. This kind. And so similarly then when we lose our mindfulness, when we don't remember what we are to adopt and what we are to avoid, when we lose that mindfulness of those topics or those practices, then desire will jump in, and hatred will jump in. And then all the merit that we've gathered in the past, all the riches of one's virtue, are destroyed. That's why lack of introspection is called, many places, it's called a thief, because the kleshas steal. They steal our virtue. And definitely the kleshas kill the life force of bodhicitta. So anger and desire need to be avoided at all costs. It's almost like our kleshas are always, because of habits, because of our habits, they're always lurking, waiting for a weakness, And those weaknesses occur with difficult people, with difficult situations. Defilements are, the kleshas are a band of robbers looking for their chance to injure us. They steal our virtue when their moment comes and batter out the lives of happy destinies. So this is all the virtue we have accumulated in the past that has a positive effect of contentment or happiness or satisfaction or success or so forth, then the kleshas destroy that, they steal that. Also, kleshas, things like anger and so forth, we react in negative circumstances, in harmful circumstances, we can also give rise to kleshas, but also we can give rise to kleshas when things are very good and very positive. In the halls of the tents of prosperity, we can also give rise to kleshas, pride, and so forth. And so for a good practitioner, sort of the seasoned practitioner, that's the downfall of a good practitioner is a lack of mindfulness and alertness when your practice is flourishing. You begin to think that you're a good practitioner and take pride in that and kind of get careless. So always watch always watch bodhicitta, always remember bodhicitta. And that doesn't mean, here in the commentary, he says that we're not supposed to be nervous or fearful in that sense. One fear we have, I think we'll get to that, but we're not supposed to be it's not like a high anxiety, nerve-wracking practice. We should have a very relaxed mind, like introspection and relaxed mind go together. I'll repeat this, a very relaxed mind with introspection are very well, it's a good team. That's how it should work. You look at people, great masters like Chakta Rinpoche or Dingo Chenzi Rinpoche and others, have a very relaxed mind, but always alert and mindful of the Dharma. I came across, there's these to be a good, to be a practitioner in this, in bodhicitta, there are certain convictions that we should adopt, train in, or develop. One is, how many are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 4, 5. It's going to be 5. So one is a conviction that you have a mind. You should more and more convince yourself that you have a mind. And second is that your mind doesn't die. And the third thing is that there are past and future lives. We need to have conviction that there are past and future lives. And that there is karma, that there are, things occur through causes and conditions, infallibly. And conviction in that the essence of mind is Buddha nature. Tathagata Garbha. Of course, the Buddha nature doesn't have that name. But basically, the essence of mind, that mind has an essence that we happen to call Buddha nature, but it's anything that has a mind, that mind has the same essence. And then the last conviction we should have is that Buddha nature is endowed with boundless wisdom and boundless qualities. There's a couple of other things that we could add to that, such as things actually are not what they seem to be. And so forth, but I just happened to, and this, okay, then, verse 29, therefore, okay, this is, now Shantideva is beginning to introduce how to practice mindfulness. When he says here, therefore, from the gateway of my mind, my mindfulness shall not have leave to stray. Okay. I think we know it. So here mindfulness refers to a state of mind. Mindfulness is a state of mind where the principles of accepting and rejecting or avoiding is not forgotten. We can say that's what we think of as mindfulness. A state of mind where the principles of what to adopt and what to avoid are not forgotten. That's mindfulness. Because mindfulness means remembering an object. I mean, the term basically means not forgetting, or being mindful means remembering, remembering. Just like if you're mindful, if I want to take a drink and I'm not mindful of where my arms or hands are, first my brain tells me I want to drink, and then I throw my hand out carelessly and just take my chances that it'll land on the handle. There's no mindfulness. Mindfulness would mean even I'm remembering that my arm is moving. So it's a simple term. And again, it's something we can have or not have. It's not like, arms and legs and a head. We cannot train in mindfulness. And if we do train in mindfulness, it will grow and get more precise, more developed. And introspection, alertness, we can have it or not have it. Humans don't have that. It's not something like that we're necessarily born with. We develop it. And for Buddhists, it's very important, because alertness and paying attention, that's how we will recognize the nature of our mind. Right now, we're training and recognizing when we forget what we should and shouldn't do on the path of bodhicitta. We're training and noticing whether or not we are forgetting to avoid kleshas. Like in the carefulness or heedfulness chapter, all about how we need to train our mind to regard the kleshas as an enemy, like an enemy. because they will steal away our mindfulness and throw us off the path. Therefore, from here, and if it wanders, where am I? Therefore, from the gateway of my mind, my mindfulness shall not have leave to stray. So, through the power of the kleshas, like any time I lose my mindfulness and I am drawn under the power of the kleshas, I'm making karma. I'm making karma that will produce suffering. So we should be aware of that. And if it wanders, it shall be recalled. Okay, it's recalled by introspection, by thoughts of anguish in the lower worlds. So this is the idea of karma. Once we succumb to anger or lust or jealousy or pride or any of the other manifestations of the poisons of the mind, the kleshas, we are making negative karma. And the results of negative actions are some form of suffering. And so we should remember that. That's a great stimulus to encourage us to avoid kleshas, to avoid negative motivation. And as it says in the commentary, we should have a conversation with ourselves when we notice kleshas coming up. We should say, oh, kleshas are here. I've lost my mindfulness. Here they are, kleshas are here. As long as they're here and I'm involved with them and encouraging them, I will suffer. This is harmful. We should tell ourselves, we should talk like that to ourselves. It's taught here. We should recollect karma and see where, based on my understanding of karma, where will this anger, what will be the effect of this anger? We should think. I want this thing. Rinpoche, I remember he used to teach how, we have this desire for this thing. Okay, then suppose you get that thing. Then what? Then you have to protect it. Then you have to get something else. You have to upgrade it. You have to do this, that. Your desire will continue. Your desire won't be satisfied when maybe you've noticed this. Maybe I'm not the only one. But you get something and then it kind of, your desire transfers into something else. So we should use our cognitive ability to extrapolate or to examine the karmic effect of our kleshas when they arise. That's one method. And understand the impermanence of this life. Tell yourself how impermanent this life is and how short it is. No matter how long it is, it's still short from the point of view of training your mind in bodhicitta, because we have such habits. And mind, like, if our mind wanders and we lose mindfulness, what happens is that our attention wanders away from what to accept and what to reject, and wanders and is picked up by our, now I'm getting into by our consciousnesses, the six consciousnesses. This consciousness that has to do with visual consciousness, auditory consciousness, scent, smell, a taste, tactile sensations, cashmere, silk. And there's nothing wrong with a consciousness necessarily. Consciousness is neutral. It's just sending messages. It's picked up by the kleshas. And there's nothing wrong with the objects. What happens is, though, that our consciousness goes out and fixates. It fixates on an object. And that fixation, the duration of that fixation, creates ignorance as to the nature of that object. Mostly it probably happens like that. Our mind goes out to an object and we immediately fall into confusion of thinking that it actually exists in its own right. Especially we're very, this is a very materialistic era. And so we automatically think that because something is hard, it's like solid, meaning that it's an impenetrable thing. So this is a fixation, and it's a mistake, it's a delusion. And so we're so used to delusion. That's the problem. So bring your mind back, bring your attention back to mindfulness, and mindfulness of the path of bodhicitta, your training, and introspection. So be aware of how you're doing with it. Place the spy, the mole, in the right place so that you will be informed as to when you are losing your mindfulness. I mean, this is important on the bodhisattva training, and it's important also in just any kind of, well, not any kind, but for meditation purposes, whatever you're doing, shamatha or vipassana, or meditating on the love, compassion, joy, and equanimity, or meditating on the phases of tantric generation and perfection phases. All is doomed without a keener and keener mindfulness and alertness. I'll just be going through the paces without the Dharma actually converting our mind, converting our kleshas into wisdom. We need to have this. So, Paltra Rinpoche said, leave leave mind in an utterly relaxed state and practice mindfulness and introspection. So then next verse, 30, through fear and by the counsels of their abbots and staying ever in their teacher's company, and those endowed with fortune and devotion, mindfulness is cultivated easily. Okay, so this is particularly, as we can, the context or the target of this verse is for beginners. We need to first, through the contact with a teacher, a qualified teacher, we should learn what virtue is, what non-virtue is, what the precepts of the Bodhisattva path are, what the vows, what are the vows or commitments of refuge, of Bodhisattva vows, Bodhicitta vows, and tantric. If we're on a tantric level, then there's also samayas and vows to keep and uphold. So from a teacher, we should go and learn these points. Then, it says through fear, but also there's two points. Of course, if you're with the teacher, you're living with the teacher, and you've learned what to avoid and what to adopt, then you won't do what your teacher said not to do. You'll be afraid of displeasing your teacher. We need that sense of kind of, you would it would be embarrassing. Like if a person was a monk or a nun and they stole something. You know, they snuck into the kitchen and they stole some food that was part of the pantry of the monastery or nunnery. Then you would feel shame because you have a vow against stealing. And so you need to have that, you need to cultivate that feeling of being ashamed, even though nobody saw you. Like a good monk or a good nun who got overcome by hunger and they stole, then they would feel ashamed of themselves as a person who knew that they weren't supposed to steal. If it got out that they, to the community, and everybody in the community knew that you stole something, then you'd be embarrassed. You might not even want to go out and show yourself because you'd be so embarrassed. So there's these two, fear kind of ideas. One is you have your own moral compass, that you wouldn't do something even if no one saw you or no one would ever know that you did something. You just wouldn't do it because you have what is that, a moral compass, a conscience, a moral conscience. So we need this. This is kind of, it would be shame, it would be, this is called, we call this shame in the text. It's called shame, meaning from your own point of view, is shame. And then from others' point of view, it's embarrassment. These are the two, what are they, emotions? The two states of mind that will protect us from losing mindfulness. Through fear and by the counsels of their abbots, and staying ever in their teacher's company. So this idea of staying around virtuous people, people who have a positive attitude in regards to virtue, who believe in virtue, who have the confidence, these kinds of confidence that I mentioned, these 5 kinds of confidence, then that has an effect on us. It heals, it has a healing effect on our mind, it's taught. So ideally we would ideally we would never separate from our teacher. They can give us a positive, they become a positive influence. We call that blessing. We need to maintain mindfulness and alertness, then we need the blessings. Like this is what it's talking about here. And not just a teacher, but also all different places, like sacred places, have an effect on us and stimulate our qualities of mindfulness and alertness. Go to holy places or sacred places. Also rituals, practicing rituals, or receiving empowerments, or receiving the blessings through a ceremony, rituals such as that. Even once you've taken refuge, generally speaking, when you take refuge, then you also are allowed to wear the robes of the Dharma robes. And these Dharma robes are specifically to remind you of your place as a Buddhist who has certain vows and commitments to uphold. It's a reminder. And also like things like bells and dorje, like a bell and a dorje. These kinds of things are objects that foster this positive attitude, the blessings. Even your statues and images of enlightenment the purpose is the same, is to keep you alert and mindful. To really progress as a practitioner in the Bodhisattva conduct, then we have to have respect for bodhicitta, or respect for the path, respect for the training in bodhicitta, and then also have a very high estimation of bodhicitta itself. and understand the excellence of bodhicitta. That's why this first chapter is, I think, really a very important chapter to contemplate and analyze, actually. In the Mahayana approach, which is the approach of bodhicitta training, aspiration bodhicitta, engaging bodhicitta, and absolute bodhicitta. A Mahayana practitioner, a bodhicitta practitioner, regards bodhicitta as the most supreme mind that anyone could have. You know, there's many different minds. There's many different ways that we can train our mind. You know, we can train our mind all kinds of ways. You know, we can mind, like we can train to be clever. We can train to be, psychologically attuned to this or that. We can train in philosophy and religion as a way to train our mind. We can become very clear-headed. We can even, train to become very powerful politically or economically. We can train to know how to manage relationships, how to manage people, personal relationships, and other, many different things. Mind can do many different things, and it can become a monster. But for the Mahayana person, the best mind is bodhicitta. It's the best thing to strive for. It's the one thing that if we accomplish, then everything else, all these other facets of mind are all accomplished in a manner of naturally, in the natural course of accomplishing bodhicitta. Everything that you do will be of benefit to others and draw them, lead them to the path of their own awakening. And so I suggest we again and again study this, meditate on this first chapter. I mean, like it says, for ages and ages, the wise have thought, what's the best mind? What's the best thing that mind could do? What's the best kind of mind to have? And again, they come up with the same thing. The best kind of mind is an enlightened mind, bodhicitta mind. So we should really, especially if we're very if we're very, if we have the introspective ability to know that we're very wavery, you know, we'll only subscribe to bodhicitta until there's other circumstances that come up, and then, well, that's not, I'm going to deal with this, you know, making big distinctions between things like, oh, well, you know, we have to take care of the mundane, you know, and that we should train again and again to see how if we progress in bodhicitta training, then everything will be accomplished in the course of things. So this is, like in those endowed with fortune and devotion, mindfulness is cultivated easily. That's slogan there, that verse 30, having to do with that. Even in the 37 practices of a bodhisattva, Nyushu Tokme Sangpo's very pithy commentary on the bodhisattva path, right in the beginning. Second verse or so, how once you take this bodhisattva vow, like this chapter 3, once you give rise to bodhicitta, then you need to separate yourself from those people and situations that will disturb your bodhicitta training. So we need to have some sense of renunciation of those factors, those circumstances and people that will we knowingly will cause us to abandon our bodhicitta and rather indulge kleshas. So this, we need to know that it's in keeping with the bodhisattva path as beginners to avoid circumstances that will produce kleshas. We've got enough problems that just arise in the course of our joyful enthusiasm, that we don't have to ask for trouble, and it will just basically become a big, what do you call, pitfall. Then 31, the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas both possess unclouded vision, seeing everything. All lies open to their gaze, and likewise I am always in their presence. One who has such thoughts as these will gain devotion and a sense of fear and shame. For such a one, the memory of Buddha rises frequently before the mind. So this is that idea. This is in quotes, so Shantideva is sort of saying, like, basically how he relates to mindfulness and introspection is that to think that the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are everywhere, and that they are aware of my faults, they're aware of my qualities, and their love and compassion for me is unbiased, or it's not disturbed, or they don't have judgment about my behavior. But their Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are out there. Almost the example of it is, it's a little kind of mundane, but it's like everyone is blind, and a Buddha is like someone who can see. That's the kind of a metaphor for how the Buddhas are always ever present and are aware. They have the unclouded vision, the eye of wisdom, and so they know my mind. And so if I'm always in their presence, and if I have that feeling, like Rinpoche and Chigma Rinpoche, they always say, like, oh, if you just think that the Buddhas are, like a Buddha is always there, then you don't have to stress out about your behavior. It will always be in harmony with the Dharma. And so try it for a couple of days. So having that, having the feeling that you're always in the presence of the Buddhas, then your life will always be in accord with their intention, with their intentions to benefit. You'll benefit yourself and you'll benefit others. And your practice, see, the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, they have the power to create conditions for your enlightenment. So they just have, they can't, like Rinpoche and Chakta Rinpoche's, against the Buddhist Bible, very right in the beginning, he says, Buddhas can't enlighten you, but they create conditions. And everything arises, everything occurs through causes and conditions. The cause of enlightenment is the Dharma. So by feeling as though you're always in the presence of Buddha, say, then you will be in your life, your lifestyle will be in accord with the intentions of the Buddha, and that your life will be in accord with the Dharma. Both so the causes and the conditions will be, how do you say, actively part of your path. And all your actions will be driven towards your own happiness and contentment, freedom from suffering, liberation from suffering, and ultimately awakened, or in the final, finally awakened, this idea. So one who has one, if you have this feeling, along with that, like I mentioned earlier, this personal, this sense of shame of your own personal conscience, and then embarrassment or fear of others or embarrassment to others, then this is how you will, when these thoughts arise, then in this practice, then you will, as it says here, gain devotion. You'll have a great enthusiasm and devotion for the training in bodhicitta. And the Buddha and the Buddha's mind and the qualities of Buddha and all the reflections that we, once you take refuge, you should daily, it says, once you take refuge, then 6 times a day you should reflect on the Buddha and the Buddha's qualities, his bodies of his body or form qualities, speech qualities, mind qualities. What is a Buddha mind? And what are the qualities of a Buddha? And what are the qualities of his activities, the vastness of the Buddha's activities, and his like the life life. We have a Buddha Shakyamuni's life and the life of great enlightened saints or enlightened beings in our lineage. And so we should, these are one of the reflections that we should engage in regularly. And so when you think that you're in the presence of the Buddhas, or if you're a Vajrayana person, or then you should create this Vajrayana atmosphere of always having the presence of your guru and the lineage above you at all times. And so when the Buddha arises in your mind, then that brings the arising also of the conditions for your enlightenment. And so it all works with the Dharma. We should every day, and it's a practice of a Mahayana person who takes refuge and develops every day recollect the Buddha, his body, speech, mind, his qualities, activities, history, the life story of the Buddha, 12 deeds of the Buddha, the Dharma, recollect the Dharma, the blessings of the Dharma, the Sangha, the Bodhisattva Sangha, all their qualities. Recollect generosity, the three kinds of generosity, and the generosity also three of the basis, the three bases of ego clinging, particularly in the bodhicitta training, the generosity of body, possessions, and virtue. Should recollect generosity in that way. And then the three kinds of discipline. The discipline, of bodhisattva discipline. The discipline of giving up negative actions, the discipline of engaging in virtue, and the discipline of benefiting sentient beings. And it's all sort of laid out in bodhicitta training. And then sixth recollection is to always to recollect on a regular basis your own personal meditational deity, your yidam. It's if you're a Vajrayana practitioner, but these are called the six recollections. So for such a one, the memory of Buddha rises frequently before the mind. So it's good then, it's good to let the Buddha arise in your mind frequently, because that brings blessings. The Buddha is kind of, his mission is to create the conditions for our enlightenment, and then our involvement with the Dharma is what actually causes enlightenment. When mindfulness, next 33, when mindfulness is stationed as a sentinel, mindfulness of what to do and what not to do, when that memory, that act of remembering what to do and what not to do is stationed like a sentinel, a guard upon the threshold of the mind, a guard to prevent slipping into fixations, and a guard to protect, to guard against, prevent kleshas arising. Introspection will be likewise there, so it naturally arises, returning when forgotten or dispersed. So when mindfulness is stationed as a sentinel, a guard upon the threshold of the mind, introspection will be likewise there, returning when, like sometimes we forget. Sometimes we do forget introspection. Sometimes we do forget mindfulness. Or it gets scattered. It becomes weak. So this is a closing point here of that we should always keep always be aware of mindfulness and always be aware of being alert. Okay, so I think we'll end at that section 33. Next section has more to do with the how to actually train in vigilant introspection. Now we've convinced ourselves of the benefits and all these other points of analysis about the mind and mindfulness and introspection. So, and now Shantideva will talk about the different phases of how to practice introspection. A dedication of the merit of this teaching. Hmm? You don't, or he doesn't?
I can't because she's
Yeah.
the person.
I see. Okay. If you can read the prayers and carry out the practice of dedicating, if you don't have access to the prayers, then just now, while I'll recite it, then just think that all the merit of your listening, all your patience, all your discipline, all your generosity, of your giving your time and energy to this, you dedicate the effects of all of this virtue to the enlightenment of all sentient beings. All the virtue of this practice and all that is gathered throughout the 3 times, I dedicate to all beings without exception, so that they may attain Buddhahood. Following and emulating the omniscient and courageous Manjushri, and likewise Samantabhadra, I completely dedicate all virtue. Since dedicating merit is praised as supreme by victorious ones of the 3 times, I completely dedicate these roots of virtue for the sake of practicing excellent conduct. May the teachings of Lord Buddha, the only source of benefit and happiness, long remain in this world. May the lives of those who uphold these teachings be as stable as a victory banner. Supreme bodhicitta is so very precious. Where it has not yet arisen, may it arise. Where it has arisen, may it not decline, but evermore grow and flourish.